That's fine, Tom. You did at the end there. One of the interesting points that I latched on here is the idea on the commodity checkoffs, and how these institutions have changed over time, and how they probably have also then changed the farming environment, which then changed the rural environment in our rural communities. I didn't know if Vance and Louise had some ideas about that and other types of institutional changes that have occurred that have impacted on the rural areas. I'm sorry, Tom, did you have?
Could I just add one thing about
Sure.
that before you jump to Vance? And I'm sorry, but you know, everything that's being done today is to promote how do you produce more? How can you make 2 blades of grass grow where 1 did before? You know, it's all about consumption. It's all about fossil fuel. It's all about more equipment, better seed, more volume, more bushels. And, you know, our resources are finite. And we're not being very futuristic in our thinking when we're thinking about just maximum production. So
do you have some comments on that then, Vance and Louise?
Well, I think you know, Tom brings up a number of really good points. One of which Louise and I were you know, pretty involved in Kansas Association of Wheat Growers, and then, you know, Kansas Crop Improvement Association, and whatever. But I remember a conversation with a guy from Cargill, and many of these really good conversations occurred in bars somewhere in Manhattan. You know, back in the olden days. I don't know where they decide policy these days, but back in the olden days, that's where it was. But anyway, he asked the question about you know, who really represents farmers. Like, if we want to talk to farmers, who do we go to? Is it wheat growers or Farmers Union or the Garden City Co-op or whatever, or Kansas Association of Wheat Growers? With a lot of experience there with wheat growers. Well, you know, if I could allow myself to critique some of these organizations, like you know, Farm Bureau is you know, honest God, an insurance company, and as far as developing policy and that type of thing, I always felt like they were a fat, slow-moving target. But you know, with Kansas wheat growers, you know, they've had periods of real strong enlightenment and whatever, but I think a lot of these groups like wheat growers, corn growers, and whatever, when you get down to specific points of policy, they're carrying the water for somebody else, like crop insurance companies, and that type of thing. I wish that, you know, they had the ability to think more independently and think more about, you know, their commodity rather than some of these other extraneous issues. But, you know, one of the other things, though, you know, increasingly, I think you're going to see, you know, real big farmers representing themselves. You know, like, I'll just take my own personal plane and fly back to Washington and have a chat with, you know, the senators and representatives. You know,
we have evidence of that just happened, actually. There's a very large farm in our neighboring county next to the west of us, and actually we were at a land sale and they had neighboring ground. We thought they'd be at the land sale. Nope, they were in Washington, D.C. And, you know, that's, you know, that and that fella is representing himself. I mean, if representative and senators thinks he's representing a representative farmer, that just isn't the case. Well, so that's disturbing.
Yeah, whoever you, whatever point of view you are representing, I think increasingly you're going to have to work harder and harder and harder, because there's going to be more and more and more voices out there that are that people want to you know, hear, that the senators and representatives are going to be listening to. So, I mean, there's no, you're not going to be able to stay home and not do anything, because if you're not involved, you know, pretty good chance you're not going to like the outcomes and the policies that are going to be coming your way,
including the dollars. I mean, everybody wants to say, you know, and those people are also paying more dollars probably than the rest of us are.
Oh yeah, I was talking with Dan O'Brien, who's the ag
Your
economist
local guy there.
up there in Thomas County, and I said, could you give me the current cost reductions on, wheat, corn, and milo, and on wheat, it's somewhere between 7 and 7.50 a bushel. Oh, you want land prices in there too? Okay, it's 9. Oh, the other thing, Tim, it's $9 a bushel if you grow a 45 bushel wheat crop.
Right.
Believe me, I mean, we're going to be
It's all about yield.
Long way from home this year.
There's no 45 out there sitting at all.
So the fact that there's so many commercial entities, seed companies, chemical companies, fertilizer companies, they all have a huge interest in that farmer. When you have a
Crop insurance agent, crop insurance
agents all the way down the line, what that does to it, what impact would that have then on the individual farmer as they make cropping decisions and trying to go forward?
Well, I think a lot of people, or some people, I should say, raise what will pencil with crop insurance. Maybe that's not what's best for the environment or best for the community, but that's what determines. I think crop insurance is, well, we had a major change in farm program philosophy in the 96 Farm Bill when we basically deregulated agriculture. And, now we're in these wild swings and back and forth. And I did a talk a while back at our National Convention on History of Farm Bills, and it's pretty fascinating. But that was a real turning point in I think in federal legislation, and also structurally changed a lot of rural America.
Now, I heard a statistic that, for example, that 80% of all government payments, which probably include subsidies for crop insurance, go to approximately 10% of all farmers. So there's a huge discrepancy because of this agglomeration of farms getting bigger and bigger, consolidation of the industry, that they're also consolidating most of the ag program industry. I'm a small farmer, but boy, I sure do appreciate my crop insurance. So it's not like I'm going to whine very much, but still you wonder about the impact of crop insurance alone as a factor in impacting on agriculture and thereby our rural communities. Are there other things like that, or did you want to, either one of you guys want to elaborate some more on that? Are there other, like, that some of the income tax policies with investment tax credit?
Well, yeah, Tim, quickly zeroing in on crop insurance again. No matter how bad the policy, there is always a vested interest. And if you talk to it's Dr. Vincent Smith up at Montana State University, who's written a lot about crop insurance and studied a lot, but right at 60% of all the money in crop insurance goes to, guess who? The crop insurance companies and their agents.
At one time, those agents were guaranteed 20%. Tell me that you are guaranteed 20%. They reduced it to 14%. Tell me where you are guaranteed as a farmer 14%. I mean, it's outrageous. You go to all these little towns around here. What is the newest, bestest building in those little dinky towns?
Settle down, Louise.
They're fabulous.
Those people.
They're the fabulous Taj Mahals to crop insurance. I mean, it is disgusting. And those, I can drive the rest of the story is now, I will say this, they are no longer getting 14%, but we're not sure exactly how it is. They're still doing just fine.
Right. I just say years ago, it was administered through the FSA office.
Right. And it should be administered.
And they've got all the information, got all the data, but to be,
and you're not going to pay 20%, 14%.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah. And it's and I'll be perfectly frank, farm organizations profit well from it too.
Oh, well,
that was very disappointing to find that out.
Well,
Yeah.
from the Yeah, the RMA is supposed to kind of keep the peace between the insurance agents of the insurance industry and the American taxpayer. But believe you me, they are falling flat on their face in their obligation there. And Tom, you had an excellent point there. You know, if we were taxpayers and want to reduce some of the cost associated with certain things, rather than privatize this thing, we ought to go, you know, back and have crop insurance through the FSA. They got all the data, and all you got to do is just sign up right there.
Remember, Pat Roberts' middle name was Pat Insurance Roberts. He's the godfather of it, not the uncle Pat Insurance.
Just for
Excuse
point of information, first crop insurance was in 1933. Right, with the AAA program, wheat.
But it really expanded.
Oh, yeah.
What was that, about 1980, wasn't it, or something in there, or?
Well,
No,
and I got a
it was later than
confession.
that.
In 89, I
Yeah.
served on the Federal Crop Insurance Commission back in, I think, 89. There was 11 farm organizations, I think 10 from the industry and so on. We met and made recommendations to Congress about the revisions. And sadly, it wasn't what some of us wanted to see, but that's when it really happened, is when basically it was privatized to the extreme, I should say.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's the problem.
there's no reason why private industry couldn't do it, but man, it's gravy train, I think.
Now, one of the other kind of historic points of conversation about these farm payments, like Tim, you were saying that the big guys get, you know, the most money. Well, really? I mean, that is the way it is. But there's always been the, you know, an argument about maybe we should target government payments to maybe smaller farmers or something of that nature. And an Earl Butts point of view on that is that if you're a sub-economic unit, why should society, you know, help you along? What do you think about that, Tim, Tom?
Well, yeah, it's kind of hard to unpack that because, you know, we don't have a dual universe that we can split off into different ways to see what happens. But there's a lot of built-in advantages of scale, obviously, economic advantage. That's pure economics. We don't need to add to it with government policy, I don't think. I mean, in fact, for the sake of our rural communities, sometimes we have to counter that. You have these external costs, like the decline of school systems, decline of the rural areas, that you've got this externalities that, you know, like Walmart not paying any health insurance. And so that they can, you know, make more money. Well, the same things happen as the scale goes up on farming as well. There's externalities probably associated with that increased sized of farms. And I'm not well enough versed in this to get very deep into this argument at all.
The rest of that story, though, I kind of question this. So there are bigger farms, but just like the guy I'm talking about, they farm, let's say, 40 to 60,000 acres out here, 60 to 80,000 acres. They don't own all that.
Right.
So they are paying, you know, whatever payments they're getting for the government, they're also paying cash rents.
Right.
So they are, you know, they are those people in the rest homes or wherever they move to, they are, you know, paying those people, except those people are, well, they may not be in the community, or they've inherited it and they're living other places and they're still getting their money and they don't really care what's going on as long as they get their rent.
But in farming, control of an asset is tantamount to, you know, ownership almost. I mean, if you control that rented land and you go talk to the lady in the rest home,
yeah,
and she says, sure, well, she's always going to do what you want. So it's anyway, it's a really complicated issue. Tom, did you want to jump in on some of this?
Well, I stepped away there for a second because in my files, and I've got tremendous files. And historically, I found an article of the top 10 farm payment recipients. It was in the 1930s in Western Kansas. And I recognize 4 of them names are still big farmers. So it's been going on forever. But yeah, I think you got to look at, payment limitations are, that was one of the bad things I think had happened a number of years ago when they doubled up on payments without regard to payment limitations. And it just made the healthy healthier. And it helped everybody, but it helped the big hogs at the trough. I mean, that's the reason I learned that from, you learn a lot of the lessons I learned from early farming days was, just by watching nature. You'd see, I remember we'd keep the old boar hogs separate from the little because they'd squeeze in, they'd take all the food, or they'd lay over and be so big and fat that they'd kill everything else, And so I think that's the way with economics. You need some type of between the ditches type of regulation. Same with farm programs. You just can't feed all of the hogs the same. You gotta feed, for the best results.
Well, one of the comments about, that 50,000 or the 40,000 limitation, that was an attempt to kind of, slow down some of the payments going to the bigger farmers. But as I am fond of saying, make it foolproof and we'll design a better fool.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is, that's why, these CPAs and, the old Kennedy and Co. and whatever have done so well in, coming up with all these different creative ways around the limitation issue.
We could talk about Arkansas Christmas trees, back in the day. Jerry,
Right.
something here. He wanted to jump in. Was kind of, Jerry, did you want to,
Sure.
you had something you wanted to add here?
Just a general comment on farm subsidies going back forever. It was unpopular with everybody except the people who were getting the subsidies, and it was naturally, and there was a lot of pushback for that. So there was a lot of good reason to get rid of the farm subsidies, but I'm not so sure that they came in with any real improvement over that, because with the farm subsidies, they had payment limitations, and the payment limitations, that people got around that by forming more and more farming entities. There's any way that they've come up with to limit people gouging the system, people have rapidly found a way around it. And I think that's where we are now.
I think I would agree with that. My dad always spoke of this 40, 50 years ago, that a lot of the farm program, back then he talked about target prices. They talked about price per bushel, not farm income per se, per farmer. But he said that the 10 Federal Reserve banks would watch the money flow in the country, and they would use farm programs to shift more money into different districts, economic districts in the United States, to make the economy flow and balance better. I don't think we have that type of mentality now, but it's interesting. I mean, we talk about farm programs for the purpose of helping a farmer, helping a rural community, but a lot of times there's a lot of other ulterior motives behind this.
Well, so
Beneficiaries.
So Tim, what do you think about doing away with farm program payments altogether? If you look on the environmental working group at that list, it's kind of interesting going through that county by county and seeing all the millions of dollars that are going to farmers. And I periodically have, wonder, like, how in the hell can we justify, getting all this money? What would happen if we did away with farm payments? I thought about that a little, and one of the economic realities here, those farm payments are totally capitalized into everything that we do, to the point where I really don't think that they do us any good. But the danger is, if you take them out of that equation, you're going to have to decapitalize the system, and it's going to be a bloodbath like you've never seen before. So What do you think, Tom?
I wouldn't be farming today if it wasn't for farm programs in my life, period. End of story. I just wouldn't be. And I think, and I think people like me have made a good contribution, not only to the local community, but to the economy and to the country and the world by that process. And I think throwing that out, I think you threw out a lot of things with it. It's you just, I would never say that about, because we live in a world where there's too many economic powers. I mean, look at the grain traders and how they function. I mean, we don't have a chance. Some old historic papers are really fun to read, some of the speeches. I remember one, National Secretary of Farmers Union back in 1924, he goes, "You farmers," he said, you haven't sold a bushel of wheat or a bale of cotton in your life. He said it was sold before you ever raised it. You just deliver it and take what they offer. And that's the truth. It still is today. And that's the reason you have to have farm programs, because we're not in an economic reality. We're not in an economic system that plays fair. And there's a lot of money to be made in cheap commodities. And there's a lot of, and farmers at their expense are going to do it. Farmers are going to produce, they're going to raise, they're not going to stop, and somebody's taking advantage of their inherent want to produce good, healthy food.
But, one of the other consequences of taking away farm payments, if you took those farm payments away, like I said, the profit in farming is farm payments. You take those away, and if you really want to drop the reins on a very rapidly running horse, that's the way to do it. Farm size will really take off at that point. And we all know where Lane County and Dighton and Healy are headed. We're going to get there a lot faster without those government payments. And I think, Tom, one of the things he was kind of intimating was that here in the United States, we have ways of subsidizing agriculture, and around the globe, every one of our other competitors does the same thing. There's a lot of ways of subsidizing agriculture. So there's, as they say, there's no virgins out there, guys.
And I'll go back to your environmental working group thing. And one thing that bugs me about that list in my county anyway, 3 of the 4 of the biggest farmers don't show up in the top 20.
Yeah,
because they're diversified. And so when people look at that, they see, oh, him and him and him, but they're not the big hogs at the trough. They're big, but that isn't really a good cross section of reality. The EWG thing.
It is. You're saying it isn't?
It isn't. I don't think that it doesn't tell the story about the big operators. Everybody else is probably right.
Well, our accountant occasionally slips up and says things that he shouldn't, but we're always, really hanging on every word he said. But he was talking about, a farm family that has like 35 tax returns. They know how to organize and capitalize on huge.
Oh, I think it's called 80,000 acres.
This subject is just truly passionate and complicated, all put together. And it's one of those things we could probably talk about pretty much all the night, and it would be interesting. And I'd like to thank Louise and Vance and Tom and Jerry and Connie and everybody that's participated on this. This was a really good discussion.